if we want to grow our plants big enough to feed us, then we need to feed them. Right here on the Backyard Gardens podcast, we're going to be talking about fertilization.
To have a good harvest, one must plant good seeds and must also use the right kind of fertilizer. The carrots have grown large and firm. How good they will taste.
Welcome to the Backyard Gardens podcast, where we talk about all things gardening and give the information out for you to be successful in your garden, whether it's your first or your last. We are your hosts, Ben, the backyard gardener, and
Batavia, the front yard gardener.
one in the country,
One in the city.
Now get ready as we dig deep into this wonderful world of gardening as we learn to grow and grow for change. All right, we are here and we are going to talk about fertilizing plants. How fun is that, Batavia?
I got to kick it off early. You get to Bill.
Kick it off.
I think I'm ready. Is this year? How many years does it normally take me? 3 years?
Yeah.
I think I'm catching on. This is like year 2 for me. I mean, clearly I don't have a lot growing in the garden, but I'm still pretty proud of myself.
Well, you know, it's funny. When I was editing the last episode, I got to the point where you were like, if I hear about your tomatoes one more time. But seriously, thank you for and you started talking about fertilizing and how you started doing it.
Oh, yeah,
and it was a good reminder that, you are slow to the uptake, but when you adopt it, you do,
Yeah.
So
yeah, every now
it's
and
okay
again,
to be slow.
Someone taps me on the head and says, "Oh, that's okay. Listen, we can take our time with you. We understand." No, I've and I was actually almost anti fertilizing seedlings, but
no, you weren't almost.
Yeah,
You were.
It was like, all right, I mix up it, and that shit stinks, man. First off, but I prefer to use this because I'm using still Neptune's Harvest, the seaweed mix. And I prefer to use that indoors, surprisingly enough.
No, you use the fish seaweed or the seaweed mix? Blue label or green label?
Blue label.
That's fish and seaweed fertilizer. So there's two different things.
Okay.
So yeah, just make sure, because there's different nutrients and NPK ratios in them.
Yep.
NP who? What? Yeah, this is another alphabet show.
Mm-hmm.
So look, before we get started going deep, first of all, did you see that shirt I'm wearing? I got soil in my soul, baby.
Where's your soil?
In my soul,
That's
son.
right.
T-shirts available on Teespring. Check us out. Link in the description below. But seriously, listener question. I believe Batavia has farmed one out today, so throw it at us.
Oh, good grief. I didn't realize that we were that far into the show. All right, let's go. So this is someone that reached out, and it's not I have a problem and I need some assistance. We welcome those questions as well. This is more of like, hey, what do you think? Okay, so, and this is probably one of my favorite kind of situations. I'm going to say, hey, and I did confirm we can say her name. Star, we appreciate you for listening.
Star.
Yeah, she and her husband, they're in Michigan, which, if you're in the Midwest, you're like my neighbor, right? That's just...
Yeah, you guys are like a tight-knit community up there. No matter if you're 1,000 miles or 100 miles apart, if you call Midwest...
Yeah, it's all the Midwest struggle,
y'all say pop
man.
and roof and all that stuff, then y'all are close.
Yeah. So... the message starts out, I would love for you and Ben to walk this adventure with me. My husband and I just bought 40 acres in mid-Michigan. And I'm assuming that they live near there, right? It's mostly wooded. We do a lot of hunting. But I have an approximate acre, she thinks, of open field to turn her into her gardens, right? And she did me the solid of sending me a picture, which, I love to see just dirt, right? So she sends me a picture, and so her question is, or this is what she's planning on doing, and she's like, what do we think? She's planning on doing a third veggies, so splitting the space up, a third veggies, a third dedicated to pollinators and flowers, which is actually pretty interesting based on, a future episode, and a third of fruit. And so she asked, what do I think, right? And I know that my answer is going to differ from yours. So I'm going to ask you, Ben, what do you think? She's already gotten my opinion, so now she can hear yours.
So, I hate it when you do this.
Just for the record, you do it to me on every single episode.
I know, and I like being in the driver's seat for that. But, so first of all, it depends on your goals, like your aspirations and what you want to do. I'm imagining since they bought 40 acres, they do a lot of hunting. They're trying to be a more self-sustainable
I think that may be fair to say.
Yeah. So I would actually do, if that's the case, I would do half vegetables. And then I would do a good portion of flowers and stuff. I mean, you could see the problem is you can do a number of ways, but what I would do is I would take it a step farther and I would do a little small piece of it as a feed plot for the animals that they hunt in the back end of it.
Well, but, no, she said that she has an acre of the 40 that she can dedicate to garden space, right? So I assume that if they're going to do animals, she has that other space for that.
No. A food plot is like a place where you grow like clover so the deer can come eat it.
I thought you said a feed plot, but go on.
A feed plot, food plot, same idea. So that's what that is like you plant clover, stuff like that. The deer will come eat it. Put it in the back end of that, like just a little small corner. But if it depends on how you do, so giving percentages is tough the way I would do it, because if we do edible landscaping, then you can kind of intermingle all those fruits in and you're not really breaking up in acreage and percentages. So I would give a big part of it. And plus in Michigan, what zone is that up there?
She's probably in 5 or 6.
5 or 6. So you're talking about blueberries, raspberries, maybe some strawberries, and you could do some certain plums and apples. So that's, there's a lot that you could do. So
do you want to dance around your answer any further, or are you?
Well, I'm working out my answer. So I would say 50% fruits and vegetables. And then if you wanted to do like a specific vegetable or fruit plot, I would do another quarter of that. And then half of that would be, or then the rest would be flowers and stuff.
So I need Star. Well, Star already knows my answer, so she's already like,
what is it?
Get the heck out of here. I'm going to tell you in a second. I need everyone else to actually pause what you're doing, pull over, because this is going to be one of the very few times that Ben and I are directly aligned. Did you see the look I gave you when you said 50%? I'm like, get out of here. All right, so, I wrote to her, it's, let's see. Thanks for listening, yada, yada, yada. It's a beautiful lamb. I would definitely have a flower bed, but that would be more so for viewing pleasure, all right? I would try to split up the space, half veggies, half fruit trees, and then weave flowers in throughout. And I just noted the one thing I've always heard and read about fruit is, especially fruit trees, when should you be planting them? Yesterday, right? So some of those take a long while, years in some cases, to bear fruit. So get those in first and foremost, which she actually has some plans on someone getting something that's local, some trees that are local. So surprisingly enough, even with, an acre is a lot of land. And she could totally do a third and a third and a third, like she talked about. But I'm kind of thinking about like an area that's really isolated and focused on flowers, but not a big percentage of the garden, right?
It would kill you to work on a third of an acre of flowers.
Yeah, it's not really focused on the flowers. It's just, hey, you want to have a nice spot to look at a bunch of pretty flowers, especially if you do something like wildflowers. They take up a lot of space. But I'd really try to split the garden up, mostly 50% food. So.
Well, and because, like with apples, if you plant apple trees, you need to have apple trees, and then you need to have a crab apple tree to help pollinate the apple trees. So there's like all these different things that you need to have kind of working in and harmoniously. Sorry, that word's hard for me to say.
No, I like it. I like that word. Want to try one more time? Working out?
No, hell no.
Okay.
I'll never say that again. So, it's tough, but I'm surprised that you were in agreement with me. Dude, a half an acre of food is enough to feed a family of like 3 or 4 if you do it right for a year.
Well, you know what? There are a couple of things. One, I typed it very slowly because I wanted Star to know that it really is Batavia that's responding. Because, based on my response, I think most people would say, who are you again? Leonard? 2, I mean, when you kind of think about what I'm assuming this space is going to be for them, this really is a little bit of living off the land. I think you really have to kind of focus in on what you can eat. I mean, wherever their home is, they probably have some beautiful flowers there too, if she's thinking about dedicating a whole third of the acre to it. So at some point, you know, you got to make the responsible choice and go with food.
This is the second time that we've gotten a question about large pieces of land. And a lot of people would be like, oh, I wish I had an acre. But honestly, like, it gets tough, you know, because then you start making decisions. Now, the only benefit really is you can have things spread out more. So, you know, we talk a lot about diseases and pests and stuff. So there could be a lot less of that. Yeah, crop rotations and stuff like that. But, you know, I honestly don't have a desire to farm on, you know, to garden on an acre, a full-blown acre. I would prefer, you know, to be limited to a half acre or quarter acre of just for the garden, not the whole yard. Just the space to grow in.
I haven't really kind of narrowed down the space I want. I was talking to another listener, Patrick, and we've chatted about him on the show before, and we were both kind of like, all right, we're looking for more space to grow in. Like, you know, we've basically gotten all the space for the garden is kind of used up or is going to be used up. Like, what's next? And for me, what I don't know is how much of my joy is the intermingling of flowers and food, you know, and you know, like veggies and fruit and all. Like, if I just had this plot of just vegetables, it could be different for me. You know, like, it's more of working the land versus I have a garden in my front yard and a garden in my backyard, you know. So I don't know. But one day, hopefully, I'll find out. Yeah,
no. Well, I mean, how much land do you have now?
It's like, I don't know, a couple of 100 square feet all told, if you like count up the beds themselves.
No. How much is your land that you own?
Oh, like 2,500 square feet is a lot or something.
Yeah, so you have 2,500 square feet. I mean, you know,
which includes the house, obviously, the garage, the, you know, like.
Yeah, so take the house off of that and imagine just having it filled up with gardens. Like, could you keep up with that?
Well, when we talk about a future state, it may not be a future state in kind of what my everyday life is today. So I don't know. I think that I would struggle initially because I'm struggling now. Like, I was thinking about it the other day. Like, the spring garden just means that I started my garden work much earlier, right? And garden fatigue is real, right? You know, so I think that I would probably want some help with it. To note, I think that I would probably be much more comfortable at starting off slower. So I didn't ask her, but I assume that this is going to be over time that they're building this out. I mean, just the expense alone, you know, like, she may be, you know, treating the soil that they have and planting in it. But if she's doing anything like raised beds, you know, that's a lot of space to get stuff hauled in.
So I thought about this the other day. Somebody was asking me, you know, real estate's going crazy right now. And they're like, would you sell your house? And I was like, price is right. Of course I would. And they're like, well, what's the price? I factored into the final price that I gave them an extra, get ready, $15,000 just to do my garden, because I decided, like, next time I want to do it, I want to go in and I'm going to go in with a solid plan and I want to put all the money into it all at once and be done with it. I don't want to do this, you know, over years. I mean, dude, I ain't getting no younger. You know what I mean? Like, I get tired. You know what I mean? Like, I want to build my beds. I want to have my water back there. I want to have it all in there at once. So, like, for me, it's a big deal to start a whole nother garden at once. You know what I mean? Like, that shit's a lot of work.
Yeah. So. Lot size is 3,100 square feet. So absolutely I could do a whole acre. Absolutely. It's like the same thing almost. I think that my desire to do something new every year would prevent me from saying, hey, I have this money, I'm all in, let's lay this out. I've never again walked into, you know, year 2 and the garden is all set out. I just recently built a super duper narrow bed because I can't help myself, you know.
I saw that.
But I think once I did it, I realized, like, I really enjoy the creation. And when I say build, it's loosely. right? You know, a couple of landscape timbers together, but
don't downplay it. Don't downplay it.
You should see me with borrowing my neighbor's extension cord because I don't have electricity in the front of the house and yada yada yada. So,
yeah.
But I really enjoy that creation. You know, like creating that piece. And I think if I had it all laid out, I would miss that.
But look, let's face it. You know, in the time in this exact moment, Batavia, this is what we do. We garden. You know what I mean? Like, who would we be if we sat here on the Backyard Gardens podcast and Backyard Gardens TV and didn't have a damn garden? You know what I mean? Like, the pressure is real, and it's real on me too because it's become ingrained in me so hard that, like, this is what I do. I grow food. You know what I mean? Like, I grow food. Like, my son, we just got our first dragon tongue beans the other day. They came out of the greenhouse, and I'd like basically given up on the greenhouse. And then, like,
for this part of the year, for this part of the season.
Yeah, for this part of the year. And then I looked in there, I was like, holy shit, it's like full of beans. So I told him, go in there, and he's like, these look like a dragon tongue, Daddy. Is this for real? And I was like, this is for real. He was like, but we don't eat meat. How can we eat the tongue? And I'm like, it's okay. But those are the moments I'm like, I'm not willing to give up.
But that, I mean,
you know what I mean?
That's still possible. Wait, did I lose track of what we were talking about? You said you wanted your garden to be done. And then I'm all like, I think I want to build a little something each year.
Well, I don't want it to be done. I just want to have like the bones set up and be like really like built out so I could basically go into where I'm at now. Like garden as much as I am and stuff like that. So I look at it differently, and I can. And it also creates a challenge for me. Like, I create more work for myself than probably is needed. But I love it. Well, and the problem too, when you have a big garden like that, is you have to fertilize the whole thing. That's the big issue. So we're going to do is we're going to
fish or seaweed or fishweed,
the whole shebang-a-bang. So we're going to go to this break, and we're going to come back, and we're going to tell you all about fertilizing your garden. A lot of y'all asked, how can you help support the Backyard Gardens podcast? Well, we have been busy, and we have created a t-shirt line just for the gardener.
To visit our shop, go to the link in the show notes and check out the t-shirts and other goodies we have.
Now, these are super special t-shirts designed just for the gardener, so enjoy. Thank you for supporting the Backyard Gardens podcast, and we'll see you guys after the harvest. We were going long. I had to do a hard stop. Sorry.
I saw you kept on looking at it. I'm like, no, I have more to say.
I know you do. but we have to focus that onto fertilization.
Every subject, every episode. So here we are.
So this is one of the shuns of gardening. So irrigation, fertilization, that's really about as closely related as they come, as they all end in TION. So... we'll just call it what it is, but it's super important. And a lot of people in Batavia may have been one of them and may still slightly be, think that they don't need to fertilize their gardens. What do you say about that?
I think that unless you're using something that's going to burn your plants, which a lot of stuff doesn't, like some hot manure or something. I think that you will always have a good experience with fertilizing. That's the corporate answer, me following along the party lines. However, I don't believe that it is an absolute requirement to get food.
Yeah, I don't believe it is until you start really stressing your soil out. That's when I think that it becomes more of a necessity.
I fully agree.
So, I garden 3.5 seasons a year. So I need to be replenishing constantly. So
if you go back to the earliest version of Batavia's garden, and again, the simple things that I was growing only in summer, probably June, July, August, maybe into September, I know for sure I didn't fertilize. I know for sure I just bought some soil that was in the store, put it down. I compost and I got food, right? So I got tomatoes, I got peppers. How much of it? The quality of it? Put a question mark around it. Could I have gotten more? Absolutely.
That's so subjective though. Really, and I know everybody's like, shut up, Ben, here you go. But it really is kind of like subjective. It's like, okay, I didn't fertilize my plants this year, but I didn't get any. Maybe my tomato could have been bigger. Maybe I could have got more. But I mean, is there really a way to find that out? You know?
Well, I mean, a really, really close experiment would have to be performed, and we're not doing that. I believe if we believe in what fertilizing does for you, I think you have to go the opposite look of it. So if it feeds your garden, it's kind of like your vitamins, right? You know, am I going to be stronger with them? Yes, you know, or at least someone tells me I am. I guess the reason why I bring it up is, if you're ready to do it, absolutely do it. If you're doing it already, continue to do it. But I don't want anyone to look out and run out and say, oh, I haven't been fertilizing my garden for these last couple of months. Oh, no. You'll likely be just fine.
Look at it this way. You say, if I take my vitamins, I get stronger, right?
Yeah, that's what I said.
Right. Mm-hmm. So what happens if you don't take your vitamins?
I'm weak.
There it is. No, you get sick.
Let me say this. I'm still living.
You get sick. But I'm not saying, but see, you take your vitamins, here we go, full circle, from your garden, from your food. But let's say that you stop doing that. You can get scurvy. You can get all kinds of deformities. I mean, you can get like sick from it. You know what I mean? There's like documentation of like not getting your, and that's how I look at the fertilizing.
Wait, what are we? Wait, are you guys confused? I'm confused. Like, so wait, which side of this are you on?
Well,
I'm saying
on every side.
Yeah,
I'm on every side.
I'm saying that it can have a positive impact on your garden, and then you're saying, do we really know that? And I'm saying that I'm comfortable assuming yes. Are we agreeing with each other?
Let me get around full circle. Let me get it out of my mouth.
Where are we at? Are we on the 3-point turn now? Are we on second base?
Shush.
All right, I'm gonna sit back.
I'm trying to get my thought out. So all I'm saying is, like, if we think about it, like the vitamins and stuff, like it won't be as strong, maybe not. But we know that if it doesn't get the right nutrition, then it won't be, it won't be healthy.
There could be something lacking.
Right. And so, like, the question is, do I think that fertilization works? Do I not think it is? Well, I mean, it depends. Like, I believe in my heart of hearts that it does help. So, therefore, yes, I do. I mean, I've done non-fertilizing before, and it did okay. And then I've fertilized a little bit, and I've fertilized a lot. And each year, I've always gotten something. So, it just depends. Last year I didn't fertilize as much as I needed to because of different circumstances, mainly wood chips. But that was kind of like, and then I got diseases and stuff like that. Was that the problem? Like, who knows, Yeah.
So is that a loose connection to the plants are not as strong to fight off the disease and disease sets in? Okay. All right, I can dig it, man. I'm just ready to move on to the next portion of this conversation.
I'm ready to move on to what the hell fertilizing is. Man. So.
That felt like an arm wrestling match that I had no chance of winning, and it's like you still have to play. All right.
So when we fertilize, what are we look for? Because, I mean, when you go look at fertilizer, and you're new to the fertilizing game, correct?
I mean, I think we just spent 15 minutes talking about how.
How long have you been like actively fertilizing your garden?
Last year was the first year I made a concerted effort to fertilize my garden, kicking and screaming.
And are you doing more this year?
Yes.
Okay. So now that we have that out of the way, I've been fertilizing for the better part of like 8 years, I'd say, but it's like each year it's gotten more and more. But if you go to the store and you look at the fertilizer section, it gets overwhelming quick. Yeah. So, we have, use a well-balanced fertilizer, use a nitrogen-rich fertilizer, use a, this, that, and the other. So we've done this before. We had an episode with Neptune's Harvest on last year, maybe. But what we're talking about is when you look at your fertilizer bag, you have 3 numbers. And a well-balanced fertilizer means 10, 10, 10, 5, 5, 5. All the numbers are the same. And those refer to the NPK, which is?
Nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus?
Nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, in that order. So nitrogen is for green leaves. Think about it that way. Phosphorus is for fruits. And potassium is for, when I say fruits, I mean like vegetables and fruits, like the actual edible part. And then potassium is for roots. Got it?
I got it.
Okay. So when I said last year that I didn't fertilize enough because of my wood chips, I didn't put enough nitrogen in because the wood chips suck up the nitrogen until they start to break down. So these are different factors that we have to think about. So,
and we generally say things like well balanced, right? Which
Right.
if you get into organic fertilizing, that's a whole different camp, but well balanced. And that's just because a lot of us don't know what our soil is perhaps lacking. But that
Right.
is there's a balance there, no pun intended. Because if you do have some, if there's more nitrogen in your soil than, the other P's or the P and the K, then you may find yourself adding, air quote, too much nitrogen. I don't know. Have you run across people? Did you feel like you've in these 8 years over fertilized your garden?
because I use organic fertilizer, it's very hard to do so. I am guilty of under fertilizing. So, and the one thing is the nitrogen is water soluble. So that means that it will go out.
Yeah.
So it's really hard to overfeed with nitrogen, but in certain plants like your tomatoes and stuff like that, what will happen is you'll get a whole lot of leaves
Yeah.
and less fruits. But when we're doing lettuce and stuff like that, you want more nitrogen.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if this is just a thing that people have latched on to or not, but I do commonly read and see people comment on, either warning against or probably more so warning against. Be careful if you're adding too much nitrogen because you will end up with a bunch of leaves on your tomato plants, but not a lot of fruit. Right. So I don't know if that's exactly what people are experiencing or people just know that that's a possible problem.
I think it's a little bit of both. I think you're going to look at it in extreme circumstances. So, and we've said this on the podcast before, organic fertilizer breaks down over time. It takes about 4 weeks for it to start to breaking down. It adds to the soil, it composts. So when you put it down, it doesn't immediately feed. Versus inorganic is immediately available to the roots. You put it in, it feeds. So it's very easy to burn with inorganic. So now that's been said, let's go into what you were talking about. So if we put inorganic nitrogen fertilizer down, you could burn, right? You'll see leaf burn and stuff like that and massive growth and whatnot. The benefit of the organic is it kind of, like I said, it's water soluble. So you'll get it in like a slow, steady feeding. So I don't think it's as much of an issue.
But
But don't take that as gospel.
Yeah. So, let me take a step back. Explain to us what you're defining as organic and inorganic, because there's like label organic versus a label that doesn't say organic, and it's also water soluble. So just because I say nitrogen. I'm sorry, I'm kind of loopy, man. I am all into my morning garden chores, and I'm feeling good. Like, that version of Batavia is here, man.
So when I said water soluble nitrogen itself is water soluble. Okay. Organic or inorganic, okay?
I got you.
And that can be confusing. But yeah, when I say what do I consider organic, generally it is whatever says organic. Anything is generally going to be like your Miracle Grows, stuff like that. Your liquid fertilizers, a lot of times they feed immediately. I'm not very hip on liquid fertilizers. The only one I use is the fish seaweed fertilizer. And I've used that for years and years. And that's a foliar feed too. So, you put in the leaves and it'll feed and whatnot.
Yeah. So I have invested in, and I just, kicking and screaming, I'd rather do a slow release and let it feed the garden over the year or over the season. And we're talking about probably a max of, I think what I've read is the longest, like this is twice a year. So 6 months, but mostly it's, the longer period is 3 months. And a lot of other fertilizers are like, reapply every month. I hate all of that shit. Like I want to do it once and be done with it, but that's not exactly how it works. So I have it as well been using the Neptune's Harvest. Is it fish and seaweed, the blue label, as you've noted? But I am going to start off the season for some of my plants with something that's a little bit more slow releasing. I'm really paying close attention to my containers because we've talked quite a bit about how, the nutrients is always going to be different in your containers versus the earth. Right. And then I feel like there is more of an opportunity to wash out the nutrients from your containers compared to the earth. When I say earth, I mean like, in ground, I mean raised beds. So
if you have to tell people on this podcast what earth is, we have a real problem. So I get it though.
Yeah. Hashtag earth.
Earth. I love earth. So yeah, it's, I can tell you how I fertilize now. I can tell you, so before when I first started, I would get an organic fertilizer. You pick your brand. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to make any recommendations until they call us, but I would put it out in the spring and then I would walk away. And then over time it got more and more, and I was always just using like a 10, 10, 10, whatever, just like you're straight up. Mm-hmm. And, even though you take, and one thing to know about fertilizer, if you stick your hand in a bag and you pull it out and you got a handful of fertilizer, only 0.01 or 0.05% of that is fertilizer. The rest of it is just a method of delivery to get it out there. So did you just snot all over your microphone?
I totally did.
We will never share a microphone. Thank you.
Yeah, there's definitely, the filler game is strong there too, right?
Yeah.
It's a way to deliver those nutrients.
Exactly. It's kind of like when you go to direct sow a seed and you mix it with sand. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's the same idea.
Yeah, it's a very good analogy there.
Yeah, I'm not really upset about the filler game, versus like different foods, but that's a different conversation. So, you get into different products. And a lot of the products that or a lot of the other additives I'm using now are more nitrogen rich because the nitrogen just washes out. So, I'm using, I'm finishing up my blood meal now, switching over to alfalfa meal. Okay. And if anybody asks why I'm switching to alfalfa meal, it's because I don't support the factory farming process, and it is a byproduct of the factory farming process of animals. So alfalfa meal does the same thing as bone meal. Either way, I have no judgment on you if you use bone meal. It's totally okay. I bought a bag and I'm still using it.
Alfalfa meal is probably a lower NPK.
Well, they're all just N.
Oh yeah, for blood meal. Okay, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's just N. So
or the meal. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, because you have blood meal, alfalfa meal, and feather meal.
Okay.
And feather meal is the same as blood meal. It's just feathers instead of blood.
Yeah, it's a little bit freaky, but go on.
Yeah, it is. And it's, again, a byproduct. So, anyways, so then, I do a mixture of that. And then I also do earthworm castings. I put those in for the first time this year. And that's only because I'm really focusing on building my soil this year. We've had this conversation. Yeah. So that's why I did that. I've never used them before. And I'm like,
Yeah, I have. I'm actually going to use that a bit more on my indoor plants based on the recommendations. So let me take
smells like shit.
Let me take a small break, pause, and say I'm very cautious. Not just I'm just not stubborn in this situation. I don't want to hear it. I said it.
I've heard that before.
And I meant it. You love the defense of me not being stubborn, right?
Yeah, you come out defensive.
I am very careful around incorporating things into a routine, because that's what we're going to ultimately, that's where we're landing, right? This fertilizing, even if it is, you're doing it twice a season, it's still a routine that you're creating. I'm very careful about incorporating things into a routine. So there's best practices, which, generally, okay, yeah, let's do this thing. But then there's also, you're inserting these new pieces into your garden routine, and you don't necessarily know if they're really as effective as you think. And my challenge is now, to be quite frank, there's steps you're doing, but there's also cost. So now I have this situation where I can't plant without doing X, Y, and Z. So I absolutely did. I'm going to use just 2 examples here. I planted my first tomato plant. There'll be many tomato plants planted by the time you guys hear this, but planted my first tomato plant in a container. And I don't even know what type. It was a volunteer. that I nurtured all year. But anyway, I don't know what type of tomato plant it is. But what I do know is I planted tomatoes in containers last year. I grew them and I had some blossom end rot issues. And last year I purchased lime and consciously said, no, I'm not going to add it. I'd read recommendations around it and said, nope, I'm not going to add it. And I don't think I added much anything else for fertilizing. I think I probably did, use some fish seaweed. But my point is, I saw how things performed without it. And I know that I had an issue and now I'm addressing it. So I'm not saying in general fertilizing, you have to see plants suffer and then step in and start doing it. But I am saying let's be conscious and cautious of the things we're just tossing into our garden, right?
Yes. Well, garden lime takes a year to break down. So it's not readily available. And that's, I think a lot of people, I don't want to say they don't understand that, but it's just kind of like a misunderstood thing. Just like, you think you drop the fertilizer down if it's organic and it immediately feeds. And that's not the case. So, what I do is when I plant my plants, I put a handful of my fertilizer mixture in with it, right? Mm-hmm. But here's the argument, okay? If you do that and you only fertilize there, does that encourage the plant to just focus all its roots in that one spot? Versus if you fed around and there was more food, that it would spread out. Okay, there's an argument about this that I've read multiple places.
Oh, you mean like fertilizing per plant versus fertilizing the entire space?
Right.
Yeah, and that's even on packaging. So a lot of the packaging talks about, square footage. And we had this conversation like, who in the hell knows this calculation? Like, per 2,000 square feet, that's not what I'm gardening in. So then you start cutting back and say, okay, let me do this divided by this. And so what the companies have done is they've made the adjustment, and a lot of the packaging talks about, 3 tablespoons per plant. And it feeds into, quite literally, what you're talking about here. I don't know enough about it to know, you probably are better off if you fertilize the entire kind of garden area versus the plant. I think this is also a balance of what's easiest to get the thing done.
Well, you know what? You're in luck.
Oh.
Because I'm not asking you what you know. I'm asking you what you think and feel. Booyah.
Yeah, I thought you
Don't roll your eyes at me. Come on.
You were going to tell me what you know to be the truth. I didn't realize you were going to punt this thing right back to me.
I want to punt it right back into the field.
So I'm going to go with your best experience is to fertilize the entire, let's call it a raised bed. But I'm totally okay with not doing that. And the reason why I don't think it's as practical in some instances is based on when we're growing, what we're growing. I do think that there's some, like if you go even across the board, then maybe you're fine. But I do think that we're growing different things in the same space. And so they have different needs. I think a lot of this fertilizing game is still designed back to, your farming. You have all of your corn in this, these 20 rows. You have all of your tomatoes in this space, right? So They may have different needs from a fertilization standpoint, but it's okay because when I feed that soil, it's all the same plant. So that clearly differs for a lot of, home gardeners.
Well, do we even need to buy fertilizer?
Oh, shit.
In order to fertilize our plants?
At 38 minutes into the episode, really?
No, I mean, do we need to? Or can we just use compost?
Yeah, I know you're going to go there.
Well, you have to talk about compost in this conversation.
I lean heavily on compost. Haven't always.
Fuck yeah.
But I lean heavily on it just because I feel like I've had some good results with it. It feels more natural to me. No, I mean, I'm just
it is.
Like the idea of something that looks like dirt to me, adding it to my bed. And we've talked about in some of the more recent years, you and I have with my garden, some of my success. I think we're comfortable attributing it to how much compost I end up adding. Bagged compost, for those that don't know. Yeah. I ain't composting. Here at Be Better Garden, it ain't happening,
We know that.
Look, if the fertile or is the compost pool, I don't know how much money is in it now, but so I mean. Yeah, I'm going to argue that depending on what you're growing, how often you're growing, your budget, you may be just fine supplementing in some compost and rocking and rolling.
I'm going to go with a resounding 100% authority on the subject matter that if you use compost, you can lower your fertilization bill. Like how much you have to fertilize. I think it makes that much of a difference for multiple reasons.
Okay.
So I remember I said I added earthworm castings this year. You know why I put earthworm castings in? Because my beds didn't have enough compost in them, so there wasn't enough worms in them, so the worms that were there couldn't make earthworm castings. Now, when I started, when's this episode air?
I don't know. Sometime in June.
Okay,
it's in
when
2021,
I started
if that helps.
the Wild Garden 2.0, I put fertilizer into my pots, right, that are in the ground. And when I did that, guess what? They're full of earthworms, just full of worms. So therefore, all that I'm putting over there is going to have castings in it, correct? So I'm just making up for where my inconsistency and bad behavior as a gardener has taken over. And so that's why I did that. Now, am I going to do it next year? You know what? I might do it for a year because it takes time to kind of build up soil and stuff like that. So there's a good possibility. But if you're continuously adding compost like you are, you know, and let me say this, you're not growing on, I know Batavia, on a concrete bed like underneath, because that's going to inhibit earthworms from coming to your garden.
Absolutely.
Then you should have these things already in there.
Yeah. So I want to comment just one more time. So this is going to be a bit redundant. Your growing medium does matter, I believe.
Yes.
My gut doesn't feel like I want to 100% jump in the canoe with you when it comes to lowering your fertilization, which I know seems ironic when I'm just like, the hell with fertilization. But, you know, but I'm not, I have some thoughts around it, but I don't have time today to work through this with you. But I do think the growing medium matters. Ben's point around, you know, so I've already mentioned containers. I do have 4 raised beds that sit on concrete, right? So to your point, like what, do I see earthworms in there? Sometimes, right? You know, but not a lot. A real quick funny story. I was unloading the leaves that I collected last fall for a project I'm working on, more on that later. And, you know, there are a bunch of earthworms in there. They've been sitting out all winter in those plastic bags. It's like heaven for them, right? And so I took one of my nursery pots that I happened to have outside, put some soil in it, and then dumped the earthworms in there. Because in my mind, I was going to transport them. And so I got distracted. It's like 2 days later. I come back thinking that I'm going to pick up the container and then take them to where I want to take them. I dump the soil out. No earthworms. Like, the reality is they do what they do. The nursery pot had holes in it. So, of course, they found their way to, you know, better living conditions.
Well, you know what, though, Batavia? I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of people will go and they will buy worms and put in their garden. And the fact of the matter is that worm's going to leave as soon as it gets there. If it doesn't have what it wants, it's out. So you've got to create an environment for that worm to live. I was guilty of that for many years. I'd see a worm, go throw it in the garden, it'll stay. That shit ain't going to stay with that thing. Ain't got nothing to eat, and it doesn't have anything that's rotting. It will leave.
There's it's not on the subject of feeding, but more of pest control. Like when people purchase ladybugs, have you seen that? That's a total thing. I mean, I think
as soon as that food source is gone, they're gone.
There is always this underlying concern. Like, I just don't feel great about it. The things that, you know, it's like this gumbo of garden tools and tricks and you know, just general guidelines. And then we just start picking out of it, you know, and saying, all right, I'm going to put some of this in my bowl and some of this in my bowl. And I always have to check myself and say, does that make sense? Like, is it really logical? So, I mean, same thing with fertilizing. Am I just adding more because it feels like that's what I'm supposed to do as a responsible gardener? Like, am I really solving a problem? This is a tangent because that's where we are with this episode. Just really quickly, I purchased regular topsoil. I think it's named premium. So it's like the bag is $2.29 versus the regular topsoil was $2.19. Now, I don't use topsoil in my vegetable garden. I use something that's referred to as garden soil. And I open the bag. And if that topsoil didn't look like top tier, I was looking at it and saying, this shit looks like I need to be growing more stuff in it, A great ratio of soil and wood chips, some organic matter. I added some compost to it, but I said, well, shit, what? And it made me, I actually went and bought the topsoil because it's cheaper, because I'm conserving my garden soil because I can't find that brand anymore. And I kind of sat back and said, when you think and then something happens, you're just like,
Yeah, I mean, I use so I just started my container of peppers in front of the greenhouse. So as it's true to my word, I started 3 containers with a total of 14 plants in them. And one of them was, I went and got bulk dirt, and it was topsoil, and it was just gross topsoil. Yeah. So I took half of it out. Yeah. I put hay in. I put my own personal compost in. And may I add that it was 85 degrees outside, and when I took the top off the compost, good night, it steamed. Holla back. Yeah, nicely so done. I put it in there, and then I added some bag soil. So, and over time it'll all mix up and whatnot. But the bag soil I put in there because it had fertilizer in it. Is it organic? I don't think so, but I don't care.
Yeah. Well, you know what I mean? I was looking at something recently. Like, let's just be realistic with how much of those contents are truly organic, right? Everything in the bag may not be. But again, that's more of a tangent. That we have a whole episode on soil that we put out earlier this year. So check that out if you want to hear more info about that.
Well, look, I want to do something real quick. I didn't want to start with this, but I didn't want to say it for the very, very end. But, if you don't fertilize, do a well-balanced fertilizer.
If you're saying you don't and then you want to start.
If somebody doesn't and you want to start, or no, even if you don't and you're not like against it, you just never thought about it. Let's put it that way. I would get an organic fertilizer. And I would get a well-balanced one, which means it says on the bag 10, 10, 10. And I would follow the directions. And what I do is I put a handful in when I plant. And then when that bed's planted out for the spring season, I dust the whole thing. And then when I replant something for summer, I put a handful in. And when that whole bed's planted out, I dust it again. And I'll do that for every single season. And then in the winter, I dust all my beds again. Because again, like I said, I'm gardening 3.5 seasons a year. So, but I would just do a solid 10, 10, 10. Don't get anything super crazy, until you notice you're having an issue. I wouldn't do anything. Because a lot of times a balanced fertilizer is what you need.
Yeah. Take it up a notch.
You can, and make it, and they have them so they're for vegetables and stuff like that. And that'll really help you, and the fish seaweed, if you want to use something like that, you can use that in conjunction and you just water with it. And I put mine on every other week. There was a study that came out that if you used it every 2 times a week, they did a study, and that it was actually a more productive and larger garden off of a 2 times a week schedule with that. Only problem is it's cost prohibitive. I can't afford that,
Okay.
I'll take that recommendation. Did I wear you out on that one?
No, I think I'm coming. I think I'm coming down. I had finished my second cup of coffee before we started.
Crashing.
Yeah, all of my excitement from this morning. Like I just, I got so much done over these last couple of days, and I'm a little bit amped.
Yeah. No, and I mean, fertilization is something to be amped about. Let's be honest. So it is a bitch, but it's it's important to understand. The nitrogen goes out, so you always want to put a little bit more nitrogen in. Don't go crazy and adjusting things unless with a soil test, which I recommend you get a soil test.
I'm not getting a soil test.
Nah, don't do it. Just be you. And the only reason why I got one is because I was having issues.
Yeah.
I'd never had one before, but that it's because of that I'm adding phosphorus in, and it's just a 0.25 is what that bag says, but that's because I was told to do so.
That, yeah.
So
the one thing
I had enough potassium to feed a whole army, so we're good.
The one thing I can say is, once you start, be committed, right? So unless you do get something in your garden only requires, it's this slow release and it's once a year. If you start and stop and start and stop, you're not gonna reap the benefits that you truly could, and you're teetering on that. Perhaps you've wasted a little money. So
yeah, and 100% use compost, bulk compost. If nothing else, just buy a bag, and when you go to plant, put that back in the hole with the plant too. Because I put that on top of the soil, on top of the fertilizer, because I don't want the roots to hit it immediately. So
I normally put a layer of soil on top just because I'm trying to hide out from the flies, because the compost I use has clear poop in it. So
yeah, because I'm about to mulch my garden with straw.
Yeah.
And so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna side dress everything with compost, and then I'm gonna mulch. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, there's some late breaking things along those lines. I think we'll talk about it in the next garden update, maybe. Yeah. Or the one that maybe we'll talk about it in the one that we just recorded. I don't know.
Yeah, you've already heard about it. So, yeah. But look, it's come to that time of the show where Batavia's stomach grumbles, and I have to give you my version of a recipe of the day.
Since you're listening to this, then something tells me you like to cook.
Hey, y'all. Miss Gardner and I have been busy whipping up some food in the backyard kitchen.
Check us out as we grow some of our ingredients.
But most importantly, we just try to get the recipe right. Available now on YouTube at Backyard Gardens.
Remember, if you grow it, we will cook it or can it.
Okay. I'm going to give you a strawberry jam recipe because it is on my mind. So, you ready?
Like Georgia. I'm ready.
So, this makes one batch of strawberry jam, which apparently, so do you know what the difference between jam and jelly is?
Consistency?
Jam has the seeds, jelly doesn't.
Oh, okay.
So, I've always called everything jelly, but I'm trying to be appropriate now and call it jam. So it takes 12 cups of strawberries topped, and topped means you cut the greens off, and then you wash them and you mash them. Okay, so we get them nice and clean, and then we put them in a pot and we mash them, and then you start to cook them down, and you're going to add your pectin, and this comes to about, if you want full sugar, low sugar, or no sugar. Okay. So based on that, I'm going to leave out the amount of sugar recommendation because it's on the pectin box that you're going to get, but you have to add the pectin at this time. And then you're going to start cooking them down. And then as they cook down, you're going to keep stirring, stirring, and stirring. You got to constantly stir.
Okay.
And then about 10 minutes in, you're going to take and you're going to put your sugar in. Okay. But you can't stop stirring. When you put your sugar in, it's going to boil up. It's going to start to boil over, so you got to keep stirring it, keep stirring it, keep stirring it, keep stirring it. And then you take your spoon and you scoop it out and you pull it up and then you tip it over. And that's going to tell you your consistency. Okay, it's really important that you do this, because if not, you're going to do like we did in the past, and we had like strawberry syrup in the house that nobody want nothing to do with, except for, whenever we ate pancakes. And so then what we do is you should have, at this point, if you're already trying to make jam and you want to can it, you should have everything sterilized and all that stuff. And if you want to know more about that, you can check us out. I'm bringing back canning with the Backyard Gardener. So we did our first episode of that the other day, live on Instagram. But, you sterilize your jars, then you spoon them into your jars, leave an inch of headspace, and you water bath can them. Or you could simply just freeze it and leave some in the fridge to consume, however you want to do it. So there's a lot of different ways to do this. So you don't have to can these, and you can get into where you can cut it down. You don't have to do the full batch or everything. I think the full batch will give you, I think we got 5 quart jars out of it.
Okay, 5 quart jars. And about how many strawberries did you guys have?
12 cups of strawberries.
Okay.
So the reason why I bring it up is, look, I grow strawberries, and I do not grow enough to get 12 cups of strawberries. That's okay. We went and we picked our own at a farm, or when they go on sale at the grocery store, you can get them. When they're on sale at the grocery store, they're usually super ripe and super in season, and that's the time to get them.
Don't start tasting a strawberry out of every container like I would be inclined
That's
to
what I do.
Nope. Don't do
That's
it.
what I do.
No.
I walked up to there one day and said, I hear this is this empty thing of strawberries. Can I pay for it? And the lady was like, there's no strawberries in there, honey. You ain't got to pay for nothing. I was like, you damn right. So
You should have seen me this is like, I don't know, like a month or two ago. And I'm like, I am absolutely a grape taster in the stores. And
Yeah.
I'm like rubbing the grape off on my shirt, trying to stuff it under my mask, you know?
yeah,
None of that adds up, but hey, that's who I am.
no. So strawberry jam.
Okay, I appreciate it. I do have some apprehension about the jellies and the jams and all for canning.
Why?
I feel like I'm just this nervous Nelly. I'm not that person, but I'm nervous about.
It's the perfect starter to getting it because it's water bath. You don't have to do any pressure canning.
Well, yeah,
so-
I love a good water bath canning recipe. One of my good friends, and I mentioned this before, her mother does a lot of canning. Like she does that exact thing, like gets batches of insert. She does like, I think it's a plum jelly or jam. Oh, good stuff. So there is also that whole balance of I'm just going to wait and get the good stuff. And then two, I don't eat a whole lot of jelly. Right. And I don't know if it's just because the jelly isn't that great, because jelly in the stores it's really super sweet.
Yeah, we do low sugar personally. So I think we put four cups of sugar into 10 jars. I told the story when I was on the back canning with the backyard gardener, but my granny, she made us some blackberry jam. And that shit was so sweet. I thought my teeth were going to fall out. We didn't eat. Nobody ate it. We just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Yeah.
So, this year, and again, we have a child, and I mean, he eats the shit out of peanut butter and jelly. So, but we are going to try and make pepper jelly, ground cherry jelly, apple jelly, blueberry jelly, and maybe raspberry this year. And we're going to do basil jelly too.
We should talk about a collabo where, I join you all and can by numbers or something for that pepper jelly.
I ain't collabo with shit with you. I'm joking. That's all we do.
I need to be off camera though, when I'm just
collabo?
like, oh shit,
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, and so the reason why I say all those different jellies is because we're harvesting a lot of these things, like the ground cherries, we're harvesting them, we're going to can them. Find a way to eat them.
Yeah.
Incorporate it into your diet, and it's like, hey, I don't want to have a lot of sugar, so that's why we do everything low sugar.
Yeah. Well, I am also a big fan of doing the thing that you can't buy in the store. And of course, I can buy tomatoes in the store, but we know tomatoes from my garden are better than tomatoes in the store. But for other things.
Do you know what else, though, that we know about tomatoes?
What's that?
Tomatoes from my garden are better than tomatoes from your garden.
Okay.
I'm joking.
I'm not in a place to entertain nonsense, right? So
you're on the wrong show, then. You are on the wrong show.
But I also like the idea of it's a recipe that I've never had pepper jelly from the store.
No, I haven't either. I've had it at like farmers markets and stuff like that. And, you look at the canning cookbooks and canning recipes. Dude, there's all kinds.
Remind me when we wrap up, I need to look at that cookbook we were talking about.
Oh yeah, okay. So, but yeah, we're just gonna try and incorporate it into our diets in a different way, and maybe eat a little bit less butter on our bread and eat more jelly. Would that be a bad thing? I don't know.
Ugh, don't even get me started. I've told you this before. I don't eat a lot of bread, but when I eat bread, I always say I can't believe, because I eat it with butter in a lot of cases. I can't believe how good bread and butter is. So let's just I'm glad you walked through that recipe because I did enjoy as you guys were going through it. So I'm glad you shared that with the listeners. Two, I do wish it was a regular food recipe because I'm so hungry, and I'm not going to go and can strawberries right now. So
you should.
Well,
you should. You know what? You can't. No, I'm trying to throw some canning out in the world for everybody.
Yeah,
so.
it's the right thing to do, but
when I make some mushroom jelly, everybody's gonna be happy. That sounds gross. So, all right, everybody. So, if you haven't fertilized and you want to, get a well-balanced fertilizer. Organic means it lasts a long time. It takes a long time for it to feed. It's hard to overfeed. Inorganic means it feeds right away, and it's easier to overfeed. And until next time, fertilize your gardens, have fun, be safe, keep it real, and we'll talk to you later.
See ya.
Thanks for hanging out with us today. If you want to see what we're up to or just stay up to date on all the announcements regarding the show or anything gardening, then you can follow us on Instagram at Backyard Gardens TV.
We love seeing what you guys are doing, so use hashtag BYG Podcast in your posts, and we'll be sharing your gardens with the Backyard Gardens community.
And check us out on YouTube at Backyard Gardens, where we will post this show, all of our other shows, clips, and then also some gardening tips and just gardening entertainment. And you can see us at our website at backyardgardenstv.com. But that's it for today's show. So help us as we learn to grow and grow for change. And until next time, we'll catch you guys later. We'll call this one a wrap.
Now you know why people feel like celebrating at harvest time.
All over the world, people have feasting and good times when the crops have been gathered in.